Hello there. Welcome into a Tuesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app is sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and they aren't all football. Most of them are football, but not all of them. Because there's a team at 20th and Blake that is ruining everything. Get to that a little bit later. Colts have made a decision, so you know which quarterback the Broncos are going to try and terrorize in week 2. Nate Kreckman is going to drop by, have a little Mountain West conversation. What would have to happen for Boise State to not win the conference? And could Air Force be a dark horse to meet Boise State in the Mountain West title game? In the meantime, your thoughts very much welcome, as they always are. 719-247-1313. You can call or text into the show. Let's start with a somewhat ailing pass rusher for the Denver Broncos. How's Nick Bonitto feeling these days?
I'm still trying to get used to just my footing and moving around again and stuff like that, because I wasn't really able to this past week or so. So I'm still figuring my way out.
And he's got some time, and he said today that the reason he got the procedure on his foot was so he would be good to go. And if he got it taken care of and fixed up, then he wouldn't have to worry as much about re-aggravating it. You're never going to completely eliminate the risk of that, but so he's on track to play. Is he on track to get paid? Here's Nick Bonitto on how the negotiations are going.
They're going well. I feel like there's been good communication on both sides. I think, it's just my agent. I feel like he's one of the best in the game. I feel like I got to trust what he's doing, and knowing how they feel about me upstairs, I feel like something will get done, but it's just a matter of when. And, until then, I just got to keep doing me.
When is the question, right? When is this thing going to get done? Because going back to Nick Bonitto and the foot injury, it's a volatile sport. And Nick Bonitto deserves credit because unlike some of his peers, he has chosen to be out there for the Denver Broncos. He has played in preseason game, not games, but game. But no starters except Evan Ingram played in the last one. So you have to give Nick Bonitto a lot of credit because he's not doing the hold in. He's not doing the hold out. He's participating. He's out there. He picked up this foot injury, but he's still around the team. But once the season begins and he's out there in a lame duck year, essentially, I got to imagine could be a bit worrisome for Nick Bonitto and his representation. Here's Bonitto on whether he would like to get something done before the season begins.
Yeah, I would like to get it done, but that's like the least of my worries, honestly. Like, I just want to compete for a championship this year, do all the things that we have set out to do as a team and as a defense. So.
And it's easy for him to say that now. But because they still have another preseason game. The NFL season is so close, we can almost taste it, but it's still kind of, we got some things to do. So for Nick Bonitto to say it's the least of his worries now, okay, but Now you're prepping on the Titans. Now you're going through the last walkthrough practice before the game on Sunday. Is this going to be the least of your worries then? And this is not, because again, Nick Bonitto has been a good soldier this entire time. Think about all the contract noise that has been going on across the NFL. Micah Parsons, even early in the offseason with TJ Watt, now Cam Hayward for the Steelers, and Terry McLaurin, and Shamar Stewart, and Trey Hendrickson. Been all over the place. And you haven't heard a peep out of Nick Bonitto. But this is a matter of practicality. This is you're going into your final season in a violent sport. I got to imagine right now it might be the least of his worries. It's going to move up the list every day that goes by. The why a deal hasn't gone done yet, I've explained before. But he is a unique case because he is a second-round pick. So the Broncos don't have the luxury of a fifth-year option to exercise on him. He is, even within his short NFL career, he's a bit of a late bloomer. Right? Not much going on in year one, year two, respectable. What was it? 8 sacks. Then he explodes for 13 and a half. And now he's set to be paid. And that's got to be a difficult number to hone in on. And he was asked today whether he would want Micah Parsons' deal to get done before his deal or not. He said he didn't have a preference. If Micah Parsons' deal gets done, and I'm going to stress the if because I need to pivot to something else here in the opening segment regarding the Dallas Cowboys pass rusher. But if his deal gets done, I imagine it like the Dak Prescott deal, and inevitably Jerry Jones is going to have to pay more. And he's willing to do that, right? He's shown time and time again he is willing to pay more to wait. The reason for that, I don't know. Maybe this new Netflix documentary can help explain why Jerry Jones likes to do these things, because it is one of the most confounding things in all of sports, is why he wants to wait till the last minute, even at the risk, not even at the risk, at the inevitability that he ends up paying more. Now, you would say if Micah Parsons is going to get paid more, and let's say he becomes the new highest paid, he sets the new mark, I would think Nick Bonitto's representation would want that number to be out there and to say, okay, that's top of the market now. It's not TJ Watt's number, it's Micah Parsons' number. But here's the issue with the Micah Parsons aspect to this. There's a fit. They could franchise tag him, as the Broncos can with Nick Bonitto. But I'm just saying the idea that Micah Parsons' deal is going to get done. And I remember, if this is now a while back, remember when Dez Bryant and Demaryius Thomas? It's funny, all these years later, that the Cowboys and the Broncos are kind of linked in this way yet again. Going down to the wire, in order to get a deal done, it was Dez Bryant and Demaryius Thomas, and they were linked. And once the Dez deal got done, it was like Demaryius Thomas right after it. And we could see something to that effect this go round. But what if they don't get a deal done? How's that going to sit? I just can't imagine that the Denver Broncos truly want, or Nick Bonitto for that matter, want this thing to go into the season. And the Broncos have done a great job. I mean, there hasn't been a single contract that they have not gotten done. So we're still far enough away, even though the NFL season is quickly approaching, we're still far enough away. There are a lot of days, there are a lot of work days in which George Payton and Nick Bonitto's representatives can get a deal done. And I would not be shocked if this thing does go right to the eve of the new season. Like the week the Broncos are getting ready for the Titans, this thing gets done. But the Broncos have worked very hard to cultivate an image that they take care of their guys, that they get these deals done. Now, they're not getting this deal done early like they did with Pat Surtain, but they've tried to project this image that, hey, we're going to take care of our guys. Nick Bonitto is one of your guys. So we may be looking at this the week of the Titans game and still maybe peppering in some conversation about Nick Bonitto. But right now, I would say that it's going to get done. And while Nick Bonitto seems somewhat purposefully detached from the situation, I think the calmness in which he speaks, and you even hear it with the quote I played earlier, I think he has a lot of confidence this thing is going to get done. I don't think this is hinging on whether Micah Parsons gets done or not. They're hammering out some details. Broncos, I'm sure, want some protections because of Nick Bonitto being that, late bloomer that he's been. I think that the track record of Nick Bonitto just isn't there like it is for some of the other pass rushers. Even going to like a George Karlaftis, who the Chiefs got done, that wasn't as talked about as Parsons and TJ Watt. But it was another deal that had to get done. Karlaftis has been productive for longer than Nick Bonitto. So I would understand if the Broncos want to put some legalese in there to protect themselves if Nick Bonitto isn't what he was last year moving forward. And all of this is if, Nick Bonitto wanting the security, he just wants the security. The Broncos want those protections. I don't think that there's a disbelief from one party to another when it comes to what Nick Bonitto is going to be, what he means for the Denver Broncos, what the Denver Broncos mean to Nick Bonitto. But this is the business side of the sport. Both parties need to protect themselves. So I'm sure the Broncos are trying to do that through this negotiation. And I got to believe that Bonitto's side of things is trying to push this and make sure that it gets done before Nick Bonitto steps out there in an actual NFL game this season, because that would be kind of a cloud hanging over this team. That would be, and I just talked about this yesterday. You have Trey Hendrickson. Now, could he be traded? You have Terry McLaurin. Like, all these teams have killed any momentum they have going into the season. The Broncos have done a great job of keeping that train rolling. No real significant injuries. Contracts are getting done. Progress is being made. I just don't think that they want to interrupt that by not getting a deal with Nick Bonitto done. But it's complicated. It is. So we'll see where this goes. But I said if Micah Parsons signs his deal with the Dallas Cowboys, Adam Schefter was on Pat McAfee's show earlier today and said he feels that Adam Schefter's great at, laying the groundwork for things can always change. And he's not wrong, but you protect yourself. And Adam Schefter's been in this business a long time. He can hedge with the best of them. But he says, as of right now, he feels like this is between Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys is heading closer to a divorce than a long-term solution. If both sides are ready to divorce soon, if this kind of feeling is permeating throughout the NFL, again, I ask the question, how desirable would it be for the Denver Broncos to pick up that phone and offer up essentially Nick Bonitto for Micah Parsons? That's not even, right? Parsons is a better player. There's other stuff that needs to be involved, but just like, hey, Jerry, would you like to swap your problem with ours? Again, I can much more understand why the Broncos haven't been in a rush to get Nick Bonitto's deal done. I don't understand it with the Dallas Cowboys, other than that's how they operate. I don't have nearly the qualms about Micah Parsons as I would Nick Bonitto, and I like Nick Bonitto. I think he's going to be a very good player for years to come. But so when I say trade your problem for ours, it's, hey, we got some questions. You got some questions, apparently, about Micah Parsons. You want to switch, and Nick Bonitto would be cheaper. I got to imagine it's tempting. And I've said before, I do that deal. And it's not being anti-Nick Bonitto. It is being pro-Micah Parsons. You have more of a track record of elite production. And now you plug Micah Parsons in to arguably the NFL's best defense. Problem is, it's that old thing of bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Right? The Denver Broncos have made a point of getting all of these deals done and showing that they take care of their guys and they don't play games. How long can they wait out the situation in Dallas? That's what I can't get over, because I can look at it and say this makes sense. It makes sense for both sides. It would make the Denver Broncos better. But the Broncos also can't just sit around twiddling their thumbs and letting Nick Bonitto go out there when he's done everything you've asked him to do. He hasn't missed anything, and let him start week one against the Tennessee Titans without a contract, because Jerry might drag this thing, and this is what Adam Schefter pointed out, like they can just franchise him at the end of the year. Are the Broncos willing to wait for that? And then if they do, are they going to franchise Nick Bonitto at that massive pass rusher franchise tag number? So the only way this works is if the Broncos are getting even a stronger sense that this thing is beyond repair, and the Dallas Cowboys may be in the very near future willing to discuss a deal. If the Cowboys are willing to let the uncomfortable nature of all of this continue into the season and into next offseason, I don't think that the Broncos can wait around, because, well, they just can't. They don't want to have any even close to the reputation that the Dallas Cowboys do. They've been trying to fight the reputation that they don't take care of their guys. And to wait this out for maybe Micah Parsons, it's not practical. And I acknowledge that. But it's fun to discuss. Hey, would you be willing to trade for Micah Parsons? And I don't know how you argue against that. I don't know how you take Nick Bonitto over Micah Parsons right now. And that's where the Broncos are living, in the right now. They're trying to compete for a Super Bowl now. They're trying to win the division now. So if this divorce that Adam Schefter feels like is more likely to happen with Micah Parsons, then Broncos should be opportunistic, but time is not on their side. They would have to have a strong sense now, if not even might have to have already engaged with the Dallas Cowboys. And I don't know that the Cowboys have done that to the extent that the Bengals have with Trey Hendrickson. Take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. How long would you be willing to wait? Would you be willing to play out this entire year without extending Nick Bonitto if it meant that you would have a chance at Micah Parsons at the end of the year? I don't know that the Broncos can wait that long. It would have to be a divorce happening in the next 2 weeks. But I'll take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Just getting going on this Tuesday edition of the show. Coming up next, who's Nick Bonitto going to be terrorizing week 2? The Colts have announced their starting quarterback. We'll get to it next on Extra Sports 1300. I don't know if you were overly worried, if you're a Broncos fan, which direction the Colts were going to go with their starting quarterback. I got to imagine that you feel quite confident in the Broncos' ability to go into Indianapolis week 2 and get a win. But I think the decision that they made today has a little something to do with games like the week 2 matchup with the Denver Broncos. Allow me to explain. The Indianapolis Colts today have decided that they are going to go with Daniel Jones. And the reason for this is quite simple. And it is something that happens regularly throughout the NFL. The Broncos dealt with this with Drew Lock, this exact situation. When that training camp, where it was Lock versus Bridgewater, I told you from day one, Teddy Bridgewater was getting that job. Not because necessarily he was better than Drew Lock. It had very little to do with my personal feelings towards Drew Lock. And it had everything to do with the relative temperature of the seat that Vic Fangio was on. He was going to go, because I said this on day one before they even started to compete, that Vic Fangio was going to go with Teddy Bridgewater. Why? It's the age-old worried more about the floor than the ceiling. Vic Fangio wanted to make sure and was going to make sure that the bottom didn't fall out so he would get fired. Now, you know how that story ended up. A lot of good that did. But at the time, you have to understand where his mind was at. If he starts Teddy Bridgewater, yeah, it may kill the development of Drew Lock. And probably it did. Whatever you thought Drew Lock was going to be, it probably made that idea of him dead right there. But Vic Fangio's thought was, if I put in a veteran like Teddy Bridgewater, I can steer this ship through the season enough to maybe keep my job. But if I go with Drew Lock, even though we all knew at that time the Denver Broncos were not a serious contender for anything, and it probably would have been the best idea just to see what Drew Lock was going to be. It was probably a more useful or a better use of their time to continue to develop Drew Lock, even if it turned out that by the end of it, he wasn't worth investing in. But at least you knew 100% sure, and you were spending your time more wisely for a team that was going nowhere. But Vic Fangio's job was on the line, and he was always going to choose Teddy Bridgewater. It's the same thing happening here in Indianapolis. A better use of the Colts' time would be to fully invest in Anthony Richardson and see where it goes, even if the season were to end in disaster. Because then at least you'd know. I don't understand where people are getting the idea that this is a move because the Colts are tanking. Quite the opposite. They're not picking Daniel Jones because they think they'll lose. They're picking Daniel Jones because they think they'll win more than they would win with Anthony Richardson. You and I can see where this Colts season is heading with either quarterback. But in Shane Steichen's mind, the guy who hired him, unfortunately, has passed away. And now the Colts have a new owner. And Jim Irsay's daughter did not hire Shane Steichen. And Jim Irsay's daughter, and we see this all the time, new person in charge may want to put their stamp on the organization. What's the best way to do that? Hire a new coach. So this is Shane Steichen trying. Again, we're not talking about whether it'll be successful. I'm just talking about Shane Steichen's mindset. With Daniel Jones, who is more of a veteran than Anthony Richardson, who has been, you have to say, a better pro than Anthony Richardson has been to this point, that he's got to feel like, if I'm going to have a chance at saving my job and get the new boss to look somewhere else to make her stamp on the organization, I got to roll with Daniel Jones. Because if I start Anthony Richardson, even if that is the best thing for the Indianapolis Colts in the macro, I may be collateral damage on the way to finding out if Anthony Richardson can actually play at the NFL level. And you look at these two guys, it's the only argument for Anthony Richardson is that maybe he could be better than Daniel Jones. He's not better than Daniel Jones right now. Look at the numbers. He's not better than Daniel Jones. But he could be. And Daniel Jones cannot be better than Daniel Jones. I know that for a fact. Daniel Jones is as good as Daniel Jones. So this is why Shane Steichen's making this decision. Because he feels like, for example, going into week 2, he's not solely focused on week 2. He's worried about week 1 against Miami. But week 2, a team like the Denver Broncos, good football team, elite defense, he's got to be looking at it like so many other games on the Colts schedule. And like Anthony Richardson, while I'm waiting around for him to develop, we're going to get killed. But with Daniel Jones, I can control things a little bit better. The ceiling's not high. He's right at the ceiling, but the floor is higher than Anthony Richardson's floor. This is not the best decision for the Indianapolis Colts. This is the best decision for Shane Steichen, and he's the person that's making this call. So it'll be Daniel Jones week 2 against the Denver Broncos, and it'll be Daniel Jones the rest of the way, which may be the most interesting aspect to this. You know, we've been talking about the Browns quarterback battle, and there's a thought that, okay, at some point the Browns are going to be like, all right, we gave it a try with Joe Flacco. We got through the gauntlet first part of our schedule. It turned out about how we think. Now it's time to look to the future. And then they decide whether it's going to be Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders that they call upon. You could see something similar in Indianapolis, right? You start Daniel Jones. You try to navigate the opening part of the schedule. If it goes awry, you go to Anthony Richardson and throw up your hands and say, okay, we'll do it now. But Shane Steichen today said, no, Daniel Jones is his starter for the season. So unless an injury were to happen to Daniel Jones, he's the starter the whole way through, which is essentially giving up on Anthony Richardson. That's Shane Steichen saying, I see no scenario in which I'm going to go back to Anthony Richardson. I mean, the Carolina Panthers showed more commitment to Bryce Young when they benched him than what the Colts are doing with Anthony Richardson. So that's the most interesting aspect of this. I'm not surprised one bit that Daniel Jones has been named the starter in Indy. What I am surprised about is that Shane Steichen closed the door to any idea that Anthony Richardson may at some point play quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts this year. And I know we live in a world with Sam Darnold and some of these other quarterbacks, that Geno Smith, that have had second acts, but if Anthony Richardson's going to get a second act, it's not going to be in Indy. If he doesn't play at all this season, that's it. Carolina went back to Bryce Young at some point. If Indy doesn't go back to Anthony Richardson, if they're going to get anything out of this guy, well, they being the NFL, it's not going to be in Indianapolis. But they bungled this so bad, the Indianapolis Colts. We knew going into it that Anthony Richardson was not ready. He was the polar opposite of Bo Nix. He was about the least ready quarterback prospect we have ever seen. Supremely talented? Yes. Athletic as all get out? Absolutely. He wasn't ready to start in NFL games. And the Colts threw him to the Wolves, and the results are quite predictable. And now you have a coach that may be on the hot seat that's saying, yeah, I'm looking out for myself. And I give myself a better chance to win with Daniel Jones than Anthony Richardson. But the question is, why was Richardson out there in the first place? He shouldn't have been. No matter what you thought about Anthony Richardson coming out of Florida, the general consensus was he's not ready. And the Colts threw him out there anyway. It's been a disaster. Anthony Richardson hasn't held up his end of the bargain, certainly, but it's that idea that we need to put more on the organization. The Colts have failed Anthony Richardson maybe as much as Anthony Richardson has failed them. And now there's a coach saying, I'm done with this dude. I'm going to roll with Danny Dimes. Which is, that's got to hurt if you are Anthony Richardson or a fan of his. That Danny Dimes is the better option. But look at the numbers. He is. So now you got, what's the schedule? So you get Cam Ward in his NFL debut, or his regular season debut, I guess. Danny Dimes, then Herbert, then Burrow, who refuses to get rid of the football during preseason games, and Jalen Hurts. That's how the schedule lines up for the Denver Broncos pass rush. Take your thoughts on the decision the Colts made today, 719-24-7, 13-13. Coming up next. Last night might have felt good to you if you're a Rockies fan, but just know for so many others, they're ruining it. It is a terrible place that you have been put in if you are a supporter of the Colorado Rockies. Dick Monfort has put you in a terrible position because nights like last night should be cause for celebration. A walk-off win against the mighty LA Dodgers, probably the most hated team by Rockies fans if you took an informal poll. You get a win, and you look, and the Rockies have won as many games since what was the stat I saw? Since I want to get the date right here. Since the 4th of July. Since the 4th of July, the Rockies have the same amount of wins as the LA Dodgers. That sentence should bring a smile to your face if you were the Colorado Rockies fan. No matter what the number is. You have the same amount of wins as the Dodgers since July 4th. That's awesome. But what is going on with the Rockies, it's not good. They are, 5 wins away from equaling? They're 6 wins away from being clear of the Chicago White Sox. And we're not to September yet. This team has won 6 of their last 10. I think they've actually won 6 of 8 or 6 of 7. This team is on fire. They're going to blow past the Chicago White Sox of last year, which begs the question, how bad really was that White Sox team? Because if you spend even a few minutes with this year's version of the Rockies, you will wonder how in the world there has been another team in baseball history, let alone just last year, that is worse than this. But the Rockies, they're going to blow right past the White Sox. The only hope that anyone can cling to, and I get it, if you're an outside observer, you're like, how bad is this? The straws that Rockies fans are grasping, the hope that they're clinging to, yeah, I get it. It from the outside, it's a little bit pathetic. I understand that. But it's all we have left. Multiple 100-loss seasons, something that has never happened in the history of the Rockies, has not phased ownership. Hasn't phased them. That was the last thing we thought was going to shock the system. That no matter, as an expansion team, a team that was made out of thin air, no pun intended, that team never lost 100 games. So we thought, Rockies are going to lose 100 games. That's going to get Dick Monfort to get with the program and understand that major changes need to be made. Nope. How about, it's only 1. So you could write off, 1 is an accident, 2, that old saying. They had a second. Nope. Still status quo. So all that there was left was, if the Rockies have the worst season in baseball history, maybe then. Well, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So what will be the lesson that is being taught to Dick Monfort? Because 100-loss seasons don't faze him. And I feel bad for Rockies fans. I feel worse for the players. Because, good on them. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like to show. I know they're living their childhood dream, but they're also playing for the Colorado Rockies. So, to be able to show up to the ballpark with a plucky attitude and go out there playing as hard as you can, trying to win, despite being woefully outgunned. Like, good for them. And without what is hanging over this organization, last night and so many other nights recently for the Rockies would be something to celebrate. You know what? Yeah, we do this with all the other teams. Nuggets, Avalanche, Broncos. Now, none of them, maybe the Nuggets, before they got Carmelo, kind of flirted with this a little bit. Avalanche, right when Jared Bednar took over, they were very bad. We can have a bigger discussion at the end of the year whether the Rockies are the worst. And, of course, there's a hockey team of the same name that lives in infamy in Colorado sports fans' minds for how bad they were. But in other somewhat similar situations, and you and me have both lived through Denver Nuggets between Dikembe laying on the floor with the basketball against the Sonics and the drafting of Carmelo Anthony. We lived through that. There were some dark times. Avalanche, not often, but again, I go back to that first year of Jed Bednar. Oh, they were bad. But I remember those seasons, and any little bit of good, back-to-back wins, one player having a good week, we would seize onto it and cling to it as hope for the future. And because of who the Colorado Rockies are, that sentiment does not exist for most of the fan base. A win like last night, that should be such a triumph, and the ability to point and laugh like Nelson Muntz at the LA Dodgers, who, despite their massive payroll and every decent baseball player known to man on their roster, have won as many games as the Colorado Rockies. You're just, and maybe you do that, but then you're left with the feeling of, oh no, at the end of the season, you can hear it now. We made the coaching change. Warren Schaefer got things going. The young guys started to develop. We really closed the season strong. We feel like we're on the right track. And when you hear Dick Monfort say that, you are going to puke. But you know it's going to happen. Again, it's him in the position he has put you in. But the Rockies are going to go right past the Chicago White Sox. And then what's the incentive? What's the lesson? What is there for the Rockies to change the way they do things? Because we've exhausted every other option. 100-loss season, check. Doesn't change anything. Multiple 100-loss seasons, check. Doesn't change anything. And we know that sinking attendance numbers, it's not going to happen. It never will. They will never be near the bottom of the league in attendance. So that is never going to be a thing. So what else is there for this organization to, like, if they go on a tear, they're going to finish 20 games back of second to last. They're still a terrible baseball team. They're going to finish so far even beyond who's that? Arizona? They're going to finish so far behind them, even if they have a great September. And what will it be for? But credit to the Rockies players. Like, I don't want to take anything away from them, because I got to imagine you think you dread going to your job. Can you imagine being a Rockies baseball player? Yet they keep showing up and they keep playing hard and they're winning ball games. In any other circumstance, this would be a great story. but it's not with this franchise. At least that's what I think. Our poll question that's up right now on our X account. Are you mad that the Rockies are winning? Be honest. Don't have to put your name to it. Just click yes or no. Just the simple fact that it's a legitimate question, which I think it is, says something. Also, take your long form thoughts at 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we've been discussing who wide receiver 2 might be next to Cortland Sutton with the Denver Broncos. Why Sean Payton says that doesn't exist. Welcome in hour 2 on this Tuesday. Glad to have you. Appreciate you watching this show on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. The handle is the same no matter where you go, at XTRA Sports 1300. If you would like to interact with the show, you can just comment right there on social media, or you could text or call into the show. The number is 719-247-1313. I think the most contentious battle at Broncos camp has been the running back room, because there's some real consequence for the odd men out. Right? Practice squad released. That's what's waiting at least to, again, I think that the Broncos will keep 4 halfbacks, 4 running backs, whatever you want to call them, on the roster, but I suppose there's a chance they just go 3. But whoever gets left out here, they might not have a job. So that's what's made the running back competition interesting and consequential, and probably the most compelling storyline of Broncos camp. But I think once the season begins, save for, obviously the big picture of Bo Nix's development, Broncos trying to dethrone the Chiefs at the top of the AFC West, all that kind of stuff, this wide receiver group, the names are cemented. You know who's going to be on this team. But how they are employed, where they stack up, even the running backs, you kind of know. Once you know the 4 names, you can kind of stack them, right? J.K. Dobbins 1, R.J. Harvey 2, et cetera, et cetera. With the wide receivers, you may know who's in that mix, but outside of Courtland Sutton, there's been a lot of discussion. Troy Franklin has a great night against Arizona. Devon Vele was supposed to be that guy opposite Courtland Sutton as wide receiver 2. There's Marvin Mims. Like, where do you put him with his role? And then you go out and draft Pat Bryant, who has been, you could argue, the most consistent performer on the offensive side of the football for the Denver Broncos from preseason game 1 to game 2. So who's wide receiver 2? Sean Payton says wide receiver 2 doesn't exist.
I think some teams are more predictable with where the X is in the slot and the Z, and then in the term, the number 1, the number 2. I get all that. They're all going to play in different roles, and so we probably are a little bit different with our rotation substitution patterns, that you guys can decide who 2 is and 3 is and 4 is, but there's going to be a role if they're dressing and they're getting on the field, and they're not going to line up in the same spot all the time. I think that would be the easiest way to describe it.
Long answer to a fairly simple question, but look, in fairness to Sean Payton, this is what it's been with him. This has been the whole plan. They drafted Pat Bryant. They draft Troy Franklin. They, all of these things for specific skill sets and specific roles. And it's part of the reason why they haven't used their top draft picks. Because they're not looking for, all right, if Courtland Sutton's our 1, we want a number 2 guy that we can consistently go to. This is the whole premise of Sean Payton's, with at both skill positions, wide receiver and running back. I mean, even talked about that today had a very long answer about what he's seen from the run game. Like what they're going to do as far as the running backs is based on matchups. Well, in fact, I'll play the audio right now. Here's Sean Payton asked, "Hey, what'd you like about your running backs upon further review of the film?"
There's been a lot of attention to, hey, what's this going to look like? And those are good questions. A lot of it is, the defense you're seeing. The first touchdown yet last week was a pretty good block, well blocked inside zone. And so you're going to get the wider zone schemes. You're going to get the gap schemes. A lot of it is front related and how they're playing defensively.
And that's Sean Payton. The only guy that you can count on, or guys, I guess the offensive line, of course, was Bo Nix. You're not going to see Jared Stidham depending on the down distance situation defensive front. It's going to be Bo Nix all the time, but everybody else is interchangeable, and that's how Sean Payton wants it. Because it's the belief he has in himself to be able to identify. It's like Belichick, that old saying about Belichick where he'll take away the thing you're best at. Right? No matter what. If you're talking about going into a game with the New England Patriots at the height of their powers, it was always, all right, we do this best. We run the football, or this player is our best player, or this, that, or the other. Well, you got to cross that off the list. You're not going to be able to do that. Quarterback's running ability, nope, he's going to be in the pocket all game long. Like to run the football? The heck you are. You're going to have to throw it. Sean Payton, it's kind of a similar thing that you can't say, all right, we got to take away Courtland Sutton, because Sean Payton's going to be like, okay, you're going to try and take away Courtland Sutton. I'll bring in a quicker, shiftier gadget wide receiver in Marvin Mims, and I'll beat you that way. So with Belichick, he'll take away what you do best. With Sean Payton being an offensive-minded head coach, it's going to be he's going to attack your weakness. So if there is a team that, for instance, is a little bit better at keeping the top on an offense, that you can't take the top off of their defense, okay, you'll see more of Troy Franklin, more of Marvin Mims, maybe more of Pat Bryant, because they've used him quite a bit on those crossing routes. So it is, Sean Payton's not lying. It's going to vary on who that guy outside of Courtland Sutton is. And I said this yesterday, don't even book Courtland Sutton as a sure thing, except in the red zone. Because at least you have to say for Courtland Sutton, in the red zone, that dude deserves to be on the field every down. Because that's what he does best, and he is among the best inside the 20-yard line. But getting up to the red zone, does Courtland Sutton have to be on the field? And it's part of, I think, why Sean Payton likes having Courtland Sutton. Like, he does some things that are valuable and that Sean Payton wants at his disposal, but he's also not Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, or one of these other elite wide receivers that you have to have on the field all the time. And make no mistake about it, even for a coach like Sean Payton, Once Michael Thomas became Michael Thomas, he was on the field all the time. Like, once you get that elite receiver, you're going to have him out there all the time. Broncos don't have that. They don't have a true number one wide receiver. But you give the respect to Courtland Sutton as being the most accomplished in that room, and he is wide receiver one, and he led the team in receiving last year, and he probably will do it again. So he's a number one. He's the Broncos' number one, but how many more teams would he be the number one? Would he be the number one in Dallas, number one in Cincinnati, number one? So I think Sean Payton even looks at Courtland Sutton like, hey, I don't have to have this guy on the field every down. He can truly match up with the defense, both with his running backs and his wide receivers. So how do we determine who the number two receiver is? Who's second behind Courtland Sutton in receiving? Right? Pretty easy. That's who the number two receiver is. Because if none of this is based on, overall talent, Troy Franklin's better than Pat Bryant, but Pat Bryant's better than Marvin Mims, and Courtland Sutton's better than Devon Bailey. If it's not about that, which it doesn't seem to be, then just follow along as the season goes on. Who's the number two guy in catches or the number two guy in yards? Last year's Marvin Mims. I think that'll be Devon Bailey. I think what you've seen from Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant is great. And you feel like this wide receiver room is in a good spot moving forward. But Devon Bailey wasn't that far behind Marvin Mims last year, and he didn't play in the amount of games Mims did. So if healthy, I think we're going to look back at the end of the season and it's going to be Devon Bailey. But what Pat Bryant and Troy Franklin have done in this preseason is signal to Sean Payton, like, yeah, you can use me. You can rely on me. I can be out there. It's just that they're not going to be out there all the time. I think Pat Bryant on third down is going to be a thing. As I'm trying to sketch out what this is all going to look like once the season begins, I think they give, especially when you look at, I know Sean Payton has talked about how important it is to start fast, but let's just call it what it is. They have the Titans and the Colts. Okay, they have the Titans and the Colts. They can experiment a little bit weeks 1 and 2. And then I think by week 3, they need to figure out exactly what they're doing. Because that is a significant game just 3 weeks into the season with the Chargers. And you know how last season went in that season series with LA. They cannot get swept by the Chargers again. But with the Titans, with the Colts, I mean, if you want to try and take the top off of the defense as much as that's possible with, the two high safeties, the shell that defenses have put onto the field to not allow teams to basically do what the Chiefs used to do with Tyreek Hill. But if that's available to you, if you think you can do that, feels like that's Troy Franklin. If you want to try and do something a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage and rely on some catch and run, here's Marvin Mims. Red zone, that's Courtland Sutton's area. But third down, with the scouting report of Pat Bryant coming out of Illinois and what he's shown, some of the routes that he's run, and the fact that he's shown you throw it to him, he'll catch it. I think Pat Bryant on third down, and what greater importance can you have put upon you as a receiver than when we need to move the chains on a third down, you're out there and you're being targeted. Right? Red zone with Cortland Sutton probably, but Sean Payton talks all the time about third down. And that's where last year Devon Bailey, little hit miss. I think Pat Bryant might be on the field on third down. Give him an opportunity the first couple of weeks, see how it goes, and then can you rely on him in the games that matter the most? It's all matchup based. And I know Sean Payton probably takes pride in being different than everybody else, but he is. Like all of these guys are interchangeable. It's not, you don't go down the pecking order. Cortland Sutton's the best, and this guy's the second best and the third best. It's all, what skill set do you need against the team you're playing and the situation you find yourself in? That's how these guys are going to be used. 719-24-7, 13-13. Take your thoughts on the Broncos wide receiver room. Who stuck out to you? Who do you think will be the second leading wide receiver on the Denver Broncos when all is said and done? I think it's going to be Vele. Take your thoughts on that. Coming up next, we move to the college game. Air Force not in action till next week, but for 3 teams in the Mountain West, the season begins this Saturday. We'll talk a little Mountain West with Nate Kreckman next on Extra Sports 1300. in the Mount West is starting. 800. We're about a week and a half away from Air Force kicking off their season, but other team in the Mount West is starting up this weekend. Teams, excuse me, two of them starting up this weekend. So I thought it was a great time to bring on a man who knows this conference better than anyone. He is Nate Kreckman. Nate, dog, what's up?
Ryan, how you doing? By the way, don't disrespect week 0. We have 3 Mountain West games this week, my friend. Count them 3. The Rebels of UNLV, Dan Mullen, will get his first look against Idaho State. You got the new look Fresno State Bulldogs at Kansas, and then Hawaii is actually favored at home against Andrew Luck's Stanford Cardinals. So all kinds of week 0 in your life this week, my friend.
Well, let's start there. I was worried that I was omitting Hawaii, and I omitted maybe the biggest threat to Boise State, which I want to talk about in a little bit. But of those games, what are you most intrigued by?
I'm really intrigued by Hawaii, actually, of those games that we have a chance to be able to watch this week. Like Fresno State, tough matchup for a brand new head coach having to go on the road to Kansas. So that's a tough way to have to open up. I think UNLV is going to trounce Idaho State. I think they'll be fine. I think that's a really talented roster. But I'm really curious to see what Hawaii is going to look like this season. They'll take on Stanford this week. That is not a great ACC program. That's right. It's one of those things that you have to remember this time of year is that Stanford is in the ACC. That's a totally normal thing that we all just have to pretend like we don't have a problem with. But yeah, no, Timmy Chang is in his 4th season now, and they got a good new quarterback, the freshman Alejado, who played a little bit at the end of last year. He's got good receivers. I don't know, if the defense has improved. They desperately need to be, but I really, really like Timmy Chang, and I'm hopeful that Hawaii football is finding a groove.
And you mentioned UNLV should have the least trouble out of the 3, so I don't know what I think it could be a pretty conservative approach from Dan Mullen with Alex Orji this weekend. But going forward, we know the way that he was utilized at Michigan. Yeah. Do you see a similar vision from Dan Mullen in Vegas for him?
Yeah, no, he's imposing when he's got the ball in his hands, that being Alex Orji. Lacks elite passing numbers, but he's dangerous. I think that Dan Mullen is – I don't think that's how he wants to necessarily build his program long term. I do think he wants to sling the ball around a little bit, but like Orji fits a profile of, you think of some of Dan Mullen's best quarterbacks he's ever had, like a giant like Dak Prescott, a Heisman winner in Tim Tebow, like guys that can really run with the ball in their hands. And I think that the Michigan transfer kind of fits into that mold a little bit. They got a good back returning in Jaden Thomas. I really look for UNLV to lean into the run game here early on in this season. I think they got a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. And I think Dan Mullen, number one, Ryan, I think he can coach. And number two, I think he just gets it. It's a guy that understands he's in a showbiz town, and he understands that aspect of the job. Coaching now at UNLV, he's leaned into it. The local media has talked about his willingness to be out there and sell the program. I think he's a super smart dude. And so I'm bullish on the prospects of Dan Mullen doing a pretty good job out there at UNLV.
And you throw in Josh Pastner into the mix when basketball season rolls around. We know the dynamics going on with this conference. It's going to look different next year. Does UNLV look at this as kind of an opportunity to assert themselves as going forward the preeminent program in the Mountain West when all of this is settled?
Kind of the flagship, I think. And, what details we have on the financial structures of the new look Mountain West, I think, reinforce that. UNLV is they're they've got the biggest market to themselves out there right now in Las Vegas. They have huge eyes on their program. Pastner, he's got an uphill climb. Let's not go over the top on UNLV basketball quite yet, but he's got a great track record. You're right about that. Guy is a heck of a coach. And then Dan Mullen is just that's a perfect hire for UNLV. And look, I don't want to sound naive. Like, I don't want to pretend that Dan Mullen is just going to be at UNLV for 15 years or anything, but between, that guy's entire career and how long he has been in the SEC and really been under the spotlight of college football between Mississippi State, Florida, and everything that he has done, like a program like UNLV, I think is pretty attractive to somebody like Dan Mullen. Like, you get a lot of big program benefits without having the insane just firebrand of having a coach in the SEC. Nobody wants to have to deal with that, and I think Mullen's kind of over it.
Nate Kreckman, my guest, previewing the upcoming Mountain West season. People will be familiar with the or at least with the quarterback at Fresno State's father, Kurt Warner. But what have you heard about the younger Warner and what he could be for Fresno State?
Yeah, started last year at Rice. After a couple of years at Temple, did E.J. Warner. He's played a ton of college football, so he has that going for himself. And I think that Fresno State sort of lean into that expertise that he has. Their offensive coordinator is Josh Davis, who worked wonders at South Dakota and has a good opportunity. Look, do I think that E.J. Warner is as good as Mikey Keene, who finished up last year? Probably not right off the jump, but they got a chance to really develop something there this year. And, the wide receiver talent is pretty good. They're going to be a physical offensive line under Matt Entz. Fresno State is one of those teams, Ryan, and I'm sure you run into this a lot when you talk about teams at this time of year. Fresno State is one of those teams where, like, if you told me Fresno won 4 games this year, or if you told me they're going to win 8 games this year, like, I would believe both of those outcomes right now, because there's so much turnover in the league with 4 new coaches. There's such a lack of returning talent on so many of these teams because of the turnover and because of the nature of Power 4 schools, poaching, and everything else like that. All done legally, but still, like, that's the funny spot that the Mountain West is, and I find predicting this league is really tricky this year.
It is. I mean, people will look, obviously, you and I on a daily basis look to the Big 12 because Colorado's in it, and we look at that league, how upside down that could be when all is said and done. The Mountain West could be a light version of that. Of course, it would help if someone were able to topple the big dogs. So let me ask you, if we fast forward a few months, Boise State did not win the Mountain West, what would be the reason for that?
Whew, man. An injury to Maddox Madsen perhaps could have been the reason for that. I still have some questions about a defense that, even though they rushed the passer really well last year, really, it was not a great Boise State defense, kind of middle of the pack nationally by their standards. So I would say either injury or the defense just really doesn't find its footing. Maybe, Jaden Virgin Morgan is so good, but maybe he takes a step back. They lost Andrew Simpson. He transferred to North Carolina. So they've got some shoes to fill on that defense. I would say that could potentially be their issue. And I think a couple of offenses, namely kind of San Jose State and UNLV, jump off the page at me as the kind of teams that could potentially get them.
As far as meeting them in a Mount West tile, how long is that list for you of teams that you could see being right there, maybe not being able to topple Boise State, but being kind of that next team up? The voters in the preseason poll say it's UNLV, but how long is that list to you, Nate?
Yeah, I'll give you a few names. I'll give you San Jose State, because I think Niumatalolo is just an excellent coach, knows exactly what he's looking for offensively, and he's got a quarterback with experience in Walker Egan. So I'll circle San Jose State as one of those teams. Absolutely UNLV, as we have discussed them. I'm going to bring up Colorado State and good experience at quarterback with Braden Fowler Nicolosi, an offense that I think is really trying to get back to its air raid roots this upcoming season. So I'll circle Colorado State, even though they only have 2 returning starters on the defensive side of the ball. I'll play to the market that I'm talking to right now. I'm going to put Air Force on that list because I think Calhoun's got a veteran team, and when he's got veteran teams, they're typically very, very good. And if you're looking for a dark horse, maybe I'll give you Wyoming. Maybe I'll give you Wyoming as a little bit of a dark horse. I think there's continuity with Sawvell, who took over for Craig Bull. They're more settled at quarterback now with Caden Anderson. They get questions to answer in the run game, but they got one of the best tight ends in the country. I'll circle Wyoming as a bit of a dark horse here.
You're closer to the Fort Collins market geographically than I am. What would be a satisfying result this year for that fickle bunch up there in Fort Collins?
I like how that was very judicious how you said that right there. I think if Jay Norvell can put a winning season up at CSU, they're 8-5 a year ago. Do that again. Like continue this steady climb. They went from 3 wins to 5 wins to 8 wins. I think that's what people would look at as progress for that program right now. I'm not going to say championship game or bust or anything else like that, but how about a winning record? And maybe this as a new concept for Colorado State. What if they won a bowl game? Which I don't even know if I'm old enough to remember the last time that CSU won a bowl game. I think that would make their fans pretty happy right now.
Yeah, I thought, last year there was so much talk about beating Wyoming, which obviously is the biggest deal to them unless they have Colorado on the schedule. To a lesser extent, it's about beating, Air Force. I don't, probably better than I do how it's viewed up there. I think it's just maybe one of those things where how has CSU not beaten Air Force? Not necessarily they have to, but why haven't they? Why? So he checks both of those boxes last year, right? And so I'm looking at it like, how about the UNLV game? And I forget the date that it is, but how about
November 8th in Fort
November
Collins?
8th
Yeah.
in Fort Collins? You get a chance to. We all put Boise State on a pedestal like they deserve to be. But how about CSU brings in UNLV and beats them? As far as what can Jay Norvell do to potentially, your point about the bowl game is spot on, but during the regular season, how about CSU maybe upends UNLV at home as kind of the next step for Jay Norvell?
It's a great take. No, you're absolutely right about that. UNLV has been in the championship game a couple of years in a row. Ryan, you and I are both, we've been around long enough to remember a day where talking about beating UNLV as a milestone for a program for a long time was laughable. Now it's like, no, look at what's happened at UNLV football. They are a measuring stick in this program, and they have become over the last couple of years under Odom one of the best programs on this side of the country. So I'll circle that game absolutely. They got a September home date against Washington State. Big game, obviously, right? Future Pac-12 opponent. Colorado State, go and get that game. I think that would look very good to their fan base right now. And, they got Boise a couple of years ago in Fort Collins. What if you go beat those guys on the blue in November? Like that, you do that, now we're talking about a conference championship game, and those people are going to be besides themselves. Yeah, when you take Colorado off the schedule, those are the kind of games that sort of jump out right now for Jay Norvell and company up there in Fort Collins.
You mentioned Air Force, and I think there's just this feeling that because of what Troy Calhoun has been able to do, there's no way this team is going to stay down back-to-back years. And I think you and I are of like mind in that regard. What questions do you have, though, as you look at this Air Force team that you want maybe answered against Bucknell, or maybe more accurately 2 weeks after that against Utah State?
I think quarterback is really the biggest question right now for this program. Is, you're talking about for the 3rd consecutive season at Air Force, you're breaking in a new quarterback. Okay, so show me the ability to be able to to be competent really there. I think at fullback and at tailback, I think they're going to be really good. Once again, they got 3 returning starters on the offensive line. Like, we're checking a lot of really good boxes there. Defensively, there's talent all over the place, starting with Peyton Zadroik up top. Like, there's really, really good talent there. The question to me is at quarterback. That's the biggest thing that I need to know. But, man, great finish to the year last year, built momentum coming into this season. I know Troy Calhoun would never acknowledge something like momentum or expectation or anything like that. But I think he's got a really good team. He's got a lot of returning starters on the offensive side of the ball. And, again, Ryan, like when I'm looking at Air Force football and I'm saying, how can I gauge if Air Force is going to be good or not? Well, first off, they're never bad 2 years in a row. So they've got that going for them. And also, is your roster primarily, especially in the trenches, offensive and defensive line, are you primarily populated by upperclassmen, by juniors and seniors? And that's what I see all over the place when I look at this Air Force roster right now. I think this team's really good. I think this is a minimum 7-win team. I think this could be an 8 or a 9-win team, but quarterback is what I need to see.
To your point about momentum, yeah, I learned very early on Troy Calhoun does not believe in such things. But one thing I asked him the other day that he did acknowledge is that the light bulb came on for a lot of his players late in the season, and there was kind of that Malcolm Gladwell tipping point for some of these young players. They got to enough snaps to then all of a sudden figure the rest out, and at least he was willing to concede that some of his players started to figure some stuff out late. That's not necessarily momentum, but that's a team that can take what happened over the final 4 games and parlay it into a much more successful season from beginning to end.
I had a laugh at Media Day. I asked Troy about Brent Brigham story in the Gazette that was about the walkthrough at the Marriott and Dylan Carson talking about the light going on for that team. And I asked Troy, what do you remember about that moment? What do you remember about that walkthrough? And his answer was just classic Troy Calhoun. I don't remember anything about it at all. Which I had to laugh at. And he's joking that he was giving Brigham grief for writing the story and everything. And I just told Troy, I was like, he quoted your best player. Like he was just listening to Dylan Carson and him reflecting on what happened on that day. So I laughed at that a little bit, man. Troy Calhoun, just one of my favorite dudes in the world, but just a guy that, and Ryan, you've talked to him more times than anybody almost. Like, you know this. Just try and introduce a premise to a question for Troy Calhoun so that he can just grab a needle and pop that balloon the second you're done talking.
Right. The guy can name the entire starting lineup of the 1974 Cardinals, but he doesn't know what happened. Like, come on. Like, we get it. But the dude, he coaches ball about as good as anyone in the mountains, and that's what's most important. Make sure you check out Nate's work throughout the season, not just football, but moving into basketball season as well on the Mount West social media channels. And, of course, you know him from his exploits up there at Altitude Sports Radio 92.5. So, sir, this was fun. Good to see you again, buddy, and hopefully we run into each other at some point in the near future.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, everybody down in the Springs. I appreciate it.
We'll have more Drive Time Sports right after this on Extra Sports 1300. My thanks to Nate Kreckman for joining me. So Fresno State, UNLV, and Hawaii all in action this weekend for week 0. Air Force and the rest of the lot kick off next week. And don't forget, you're home for Air Force football all season long. Will be 740 KVOR. And we'll dive deeper into the Falcons. Maybe tail end of this week. Certainly a lot on Air Force and the upcoming season next week as well. Big 12 has a few teams this weekend. Iowa State's playing Kansas State in Dublin. That should be a really good game. And then Kansas. I don't know that they'll be in that competitive of a contest, but they're unveiling their new stadium and get a chance to see the Jayhawks. So I think both the Big 12 and the Mountain West, the two local conferences, if you will, very intriguing going into the season. Looking forward to college football and the NFL, of course. So 2 segments talking about baseball. This has to be a personal record. But Rob Manfred the other day, if you missed this, at the Little League Classic, mentioned that when they expand, and the thought is either they're going to give a team to Portland or Salt Lake City, which, can I just say this? And I know people in Salt Lake City, and I think Salt Lake City is a phenomenal city. Why in the world would Major League Baseball invite the same issues that plague the Colorado Rockies? Forget about their ownership and all that kind of stuff. I'm saying the idea of pitching and playing baseball, everybody is trying to leave, right? The Rockies left Colorado Springs. Now, Albuquerque's not a lot better, but it's a little bit better in terms of the elevation. The Brewers were here for 5 seconds and said, get us out of here. Why Major League Baseball would invite a second team to have to deal with the same issues, I get it. Salt Lake City, not 5,280 feet, but to me, it would be welcoming the same problems that the Rockies have not been able to solve for years, but it would be a great test study because I promise you the people in charge of Salt Lake's new baseball team would be far more competent than the ones in charge of the baseball team in Denver. But it's either going to be Portland or Salt Lake, and then probably Nashville. And Rob Manfred said that once they do that, it will allow them to realign the league geographically. And people are up in arms because of the ALNL thing. To me, I think that that's silly because there is no difference between the two leagues now. Everybody has the DH. Hanging on to the, I get it. If there's one league that pitchers hit and one that doesn't, then I would push back against this. But there's no difference between these two leagues. The problem you're going to run into, and it's the reverse problem of the NBA. The East, can you imagine how good the Eastern Conference or the Eastern League would be in Major League Baseball compared to the West? Like, yeah, the West would still have the Dodgers and the Padres and a couple of teams here and there. But think about if you did East-West, how bad the West would be compared to the East. Yeah, the Diamondbacks, the Rockies, you'd have the Angels, the A's. I mean, in the East, you would have both New York teams. You'd have Philadelphia. I mean, that's what we deal with in the NBA, right? Is that the West is so much better than the East. We look at the East, especially this year. My goodness, how bad is the East going to be? It's like Milwaukee has re-entered the chat as a title contender because Halliburton's hurt and Tatum's hurt. I mean, you think it was bad before the discrepancy between the two leagues. This year is going to be even worse. But in baseball, you would have a collection of teams in the East to where people would be crying out for realignment a year or two into this experiment. So I think that's the bigger issue, is that you have the more serious franchises, for the most part, in the East. And you only have a couple of serious franchises in the West. With all due respect. And a lot of realignment models have been thrown out there. And I just did geography. Well, the problem is that if you broke up these teams with the proposed expansion franchises, which I put in Portland, that you'd be breaking up potentially San Diego, San Francisco, and the Dodgers, and you can't do that. Like, people will freak out if that happens. You have to keep them together. So, but you could tweak a little bit, and yeah, Arizona would still have to travel to Seattle. That's the thing. Nobody wants to go up there. They're far away from everybody. But somebody's got to play in that division. So you keep the Padres Padres, Giants, and Dodgers together, put whatever fourth team you want to, Angels, Diamondbacks, what have you. But if you did this geographically, what's interesting, the Rockies would be in a division. Because I know what you're thinking. Well, Vegas. Well, no, because there's too many other teams on the West Coast. Vegas would have to be with them. Kind of like the Golden Knights playing the Pacific Division. The teams that would make the most sense geographically, if you were evenly distributing the teams, and you weren't trying to look out for, hey, who would you like to see in the Rockies division? We know that the Rockies have no history with any of these other NL West teams, so you could break them out of that division and wouldn't even matter. The Rockies would make the most sense in a division with the two Texas teams in Kansas City. Now, that could be interesting because of the Chiefs-Broncos rivalry. Now you have the Royals and the Rockies. But tell me you didn't have like a visceral reaction when I mentioned that. That division is going to be like almost irrelevant. Who's tuning in to a division with the Royals, the Rockies, the Rangers, and the Astros? And I know that the Astros and the Rangers are good, but I'm just saying, like, right now, the Rockies are in one of the most intriguing divisions. Right? And I think the Astros and the Rangers, maybe I shouldn't even look at it like, ew, the Rockies will be in a division with the Texas teams. Maybe I should be looking at this through the lens of the Texas teams and say right now they got some interesting things going on. They got a lot of trips to the greater LA area. That has to be fun. Seattle's a good team. So there's some interesting things going on in the AL West. We know in the NL West, it's arguably the most compelling division with what's going on right now between the Dodgers and the Padres, and the Giants are a good organization. They got to figure some things out. But could you imagine like the Astros and the Rangers, like, wait, we're trading the regular trip to Southern California, and from a fan perspective, to be able to play a good team in Seattle, and we're going to play the Royals and the Rockies. That's going to be in our division. From a competitive standpoint, that might be better. But I mean, that division, it's like, oh boy. Sell that new division to people. Rockies, Royals, Rangers, Astros. But this is this is what would happen. If you follow geography, there's so many teams concentrated on the West Coast that you got to put them all together. It just really feels like, even though it's based on geography, like you just look at it and it's like people are grouping, okay, I'm going to put New York and Philadelphia together. I'll put the California teams together. I'll do this. And then it's like, oh, we're left with, we got to put Texas is 2 teams, but we got to find 2 more. And the remainder is Rockies, Royals. And they're like, okay, we'll just do this. And they draw like a big circle. Feels like the Rockies and the Royals are like although the Royals could be like, no, put us with the Cardinals. Nobody wants to be grouped with the Rockies. I think that's the way I should look at it. Why should I stick my nose up at the idea that the Rockies would be in a division with the Royals and the 2 Texas teams? It's them going, wait, we don't have to play this team a lot. And now we're division rivals. We got to go pitch at altitude a whole bunch. People are going to hate this. But we'll see if Rob Manfred follows through with it. 719-247-1313. The 3 stories that are driving the show after this.